Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on comparative world literatures, where we will delve into fascinating world of comparative literature, discussing themes and trends that will shape our understanding of literature in a global context. Today, we are delighted to have our distinguished and eminent speakers with us, Professor Swati Pal ma'am and Dr. Chittaranjan Misra sir. Welcome ma'am, welcome sir.
Thank
Now,
you.
it is my great honor to welcome the chairperson of today's webinar, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, West Bengal, Professor Nandini Sahu, who is a renowned academician, poet, and creative writer. With an illustrious academic background, she previously headed the School of Foreign Languages of IGNOU, New Delhi. A prolific author of almost 24 books, Professor Sahu is a best-selling author on Amazon. Her academic achievements include double gold medals in both graduation and post-graduation as well. The prestigious Literary Award Gold Medal from the Vice President of India for her outstanding contribution to English studies. She has recently been honored with the Michael Madhusudan Academy Award and Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024. And latest publication, Medusa, is a testament to her literary prowess. Not only that, she has been honored with the latest in 2025, the latest award, Rabindranath Tagore Samman. Professor Sahu's research expertise encompasses new literature, critical theory, folklore, and many more. Now, without any delay, I would request Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am for the inaugural speech. And please.
Thank you so much, Paramita. Namaskar, Professor Swati, and Namaskar, Professor Chittaranjan. Uh, we are privileged to have two eminent scholars today in the midst of us to take our comparative world literatures uh, lecture series to another height. Both the speakers sitting in front of me have been deeply personally engaged, connected with me. I will come to that later. But in the scenario of Indian literature, I won't say Indian writing in English, but I would say Indian literature in general. Both the speakers have contributed in a big way, in a very substantial way. I have known them since decades, and let me start with Professor Swati Paul. I met her as a poet friend in Delhi. Both of us were fellow poets. We used to write and contribute to similar kind of journals. That name was very familiar to me. And then before a few years, I started going to Delhi University for their, in very important and confidential meetings where I met Professor Swati Paul. And I discovered that apart from being a renowned poet, a creative writer, and a critic, she is also a very warm person and an empath, a very, very, empathetic person, very compassionate person. And she has given a new uh, dimension and given a new approach to her administrative abilities by, including the entire faculty in all the activities that she does. She believes in teamwork. I have seen how in selection committees she would be protective about her staff members. She would be protective about her faculty. She would fight with anybody to take care of her faculty. And that is what really inspired me. I am a very big fan of Professor Swati, not just a friend. And she has been writing, continuously writing. She has been writing poetry, critical research, and then she has introduced whole lot of new things in the college where she is the principal. Every second day, if you just go to her wall, you will see that something big is happening in her college. And every time she promotes one or two faculty members, she does the entire work, but the entire credit is given to some other staff. That's what I notice about her. I am her friend, her fan, and one of her admirers. And I'm happy that today Professor Swati Paul agreed to deliver a lecture for this very important lecture series from Hindi University West Bengal, which we introduced in the month of January. And the best brains of the country are contributing to it. Her supervisor, Professor J.J.B. Prasad, has also contributed. Professor Swati must have seen that video. Many people are, I mean, whoever I invite, they don't say no to me. I feel so privileged and so blessed to have such great friends. And coming to her topic today, she told me that she's going to talk about a shift from teaching English literature to studying literatures in English. That's such a powerful and interesting concept that at a point of time when we were students, English literature used to be very, very Eurocentric. British literature was compulsory. Almost all the papers were British literatures, apart from just one or two, units or chapters on American or Australian literature, or a little bit on Indian writing in English. But today the pedagogy has changed. We are studying literatures in English, which means the world literatures in English. So today, Professor Swati Paul is going to speak about this very important topic. And at the end of our lecture, I think I'll be in a better position to understand and talk more about what she said or what we are taking away from her lecture. I invite you, Professor Swati Paul. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation. And now coming to Dr. Chittaranjan Misra, I know him since I think I was a student in my graduation, I mean, BA English honors times. I know him since then. He is a big name in Odisha and, of course, in the country. And he translates seminal texts. I mean, if he translates Derrida, Foucault, and you take the name of one important book in world literature scenario, Professor Chittaranjan Misra can translate it. I mean, he has challenged the concept of untranslatability. There is nothing that cannot be translated from one language to another, probably using some, transliteration or transcreation ideas, or probably using some notes or footnotes that he will be in a better position to talk about. One of his translated books I read in Odia, which I hadn't read in English, and the translation was such seamless that I never felt it's not an original book. That is the success of a translator. And who else is a better speaker for Hindi University than Dr. Chittaranjan Mishra? Because we are a language university. We cater to the needs of all the Indian languages and a few foreign languages and also folk languages, tribal languages, endangered languages, marginalized languages, dying languages. We are trying to create language archives, and this lecture series is just one footstep towards that. And at this critical point, when you are delivering a lecture for Hindi University and we are recording it for our YouTube channel, I'm sure that the whole country is going to be benefited by this lecture because our YouTube channel is getting popular every single day. So today we are looking forward to listening to you, not just as a theorist and a critic, but also as a practicing translator, the challenges of translation or translatability, untranslatability, and how to deal with those things. We are looking forward to listening to you on those things. And I welcome you to Hindi University on behalf of Dr. Paramita and on my personal behalf and entire faculty and staff of Hindi University. I welcome you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I must say it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Swati Pal, ma'am, who is an esteemed professor and principal of Janki Devi Memorial College, University of Delhi. She is a distinguished academic and theatre expert. She has been recognized as a Charles Wells, John McGrath Theatre Studies, and Fulbright Nehru Scholar. Dr. Pal has authored several books on theatre and writing, and her poetry collections include In Absentia and Forever Yours, as well as the curated anthology Living On. She currently serves as Vice Chair of IACLALS and has received numerous national and international accolades for her contributions to teaching and administration. Now, I would request Dr. Swati Pal ma'am for a very enlightening lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Paramita. And first and foremost, I'd like to begin by thanking my dear friend, Nandini Sahu, who, well, I don't know about your admiring me, Nandini, but I surely know that I'm in awe of you. I've always been. A woman who is so young and has achieved so much is an exemplary person. And really, I wish I could achieve even half the things that you have already achieved in the years to come. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak about a subject which I feel very, very passionately about. I've had some problems in screen sharing, so I'm going to very now tentatively try to see if I can screen share. I'm going to ask my technical help and I will switch off my video for a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, Swati, yeah, please proceed.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to know that. I hope I can also keep moving it to the next slide. So the reason why I actually wanted to talk about the trajectory of studying English literature to studying literatures in English, and I'm looking at it from about 1975 to 2025, is because, in my opinion, we are at a stage, and I'm sorry for beginning this morning on such an ominous note, but we are at a stage where the humanities in particular appear to be quite threatened. And I will speak more about that towards the end of my presentation. We are threatened with closures of humanities departments, with the closure of things like music departments, with the closure of things like performance departments. And I believe, I have reason to believe that English literature departments too, well, I'm sure it's going to have a very long life, but nonetheless, there are certain challenges that we have, that we are facing and will continue to perhaps face for some time till things settle down or things change. So in the light of current challenges that we are facing, I thought that this is a good time for all of us to look at how English literature and the teaching and the studying of English literature has changed in the last few decades. And I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about my own personal journey. So I took up the study of English literature as my undergraduate honors course of study at St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, University of Calcutta in 1985. That perhaps gives a lot of you some idea about my age, but never mind about that. It was 3 decades since the country had gained independence, and exciting developments in English were happening as Indian creative writers were writing in English. So let me take you through from a little before 1947 to 1970, as developments in these decades certainly impacted the times to come. So I'm talking about the pre-independence time. The period leading up to India's independence in 1947 laid the groundwork for the emergence of Indian literature in English as writers grappled with the complexities of colonialism, nationalism, and cultural identity. It was during this time that notable figures like R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand, next slide, yes, and Raja Rao rose to prominence with their seminal works. The period following India's independence witnessed a surge of optimism and experimentation in Indian literature in English, as writers grappled with the challenges of nation building, identity formation, and the legacy of colonialism. One of the most celebrated figures of this period is Raja Rao, whose novel, The Serpent and the Rope, explored themes of spirituality, philosophy, and the search for ultimate truth. Drawing upon Indian philosophical traditions and Western existentialism, Rao crafted a deeply introspective and philosophical work that resonated with readers both in India and abroad. A new generation of writers also emerged during this period, pushing the boundaries of literary experimentation and innovation. Kamala Das, known for her candid and provocative poetry, challenged societal norms and conventions with works like Summer in Calcutta and The Descendants. Her bold exploration of themes such as female sexuality, love, and identity paved the way for future generations of Indian women writers. Nissim Ezekiel, another prominent poet of this era, captured the contradictions and complexities of post-independence India in works like The Unfinished Man and The Third. His wry humor, keen observation, and linguistic dexterity made him a distinctive voice in Indian literature in English, earning him recognition as one of the leading poets of his generation. Moving on to 1960-1970, that decade, which is the emergence of new voices and perspectives, we find that the 1960s witnessed a great emergence of such voices and such perspectives in Indian literature in English as writers began to explore a wide range of themes, styles, and genres. This period saw the rise of feminist literature, diasporic writing, and the exploration of identity politics in works by writers such as Anita Desai, Arun Kolatkar, and Salman Rushdie. Anita Desai, known for her introspective and finely crafted novels, gained critical acclaim for works like Cry the Peacock and Voices in the City. Her evocative prose, vivid imagery, and exploration of themes such as alienation, displacement, and cultural dislocation resonated with readers worldwide, establishing her as one of the leading voices in Indian literature in English. Arun Kolatkar, a groundbreaking poet of this era, experimented with language, form, and imagery in works like Jejuri and Kala Ghoda poems. His poems, characterized by their surrealism, irony, and urban sensibility, offered a fresh perspective on the complexities of modern Indian life, challenging readers to see the world in new and unexpected ways. Salman Rushdie, one of the most influential writers of the late 20th century, burst onto the literary scene with his debut novel, Midnight's Children, in 1981. Set against the backdrop of post-independence India, Rushdie's epic narrative interwove historical events with magical realism, political satire, and linguistic exuberance, earning widespread acclaim and the Booker Prize for Fiction. The period from 1935 to 1970 witnessed a remarkable evolution in Indian literature in English, marked by the emergence of pioneering voices, the exploration of diverse themes and styles, and the assertion of cultural and literary identities against the backdrop of colonialism and post-independence nation building. From the realism of R.K. Narayan and Mulk Raj Anand to the modernism of Raja Rao and the experimentalism of Salman Rushdie and Arun Kolatkar, Indian literature in English during this period reflected the dynamism, diversity, and complexity of Indian society and culture, leaving an indelible mark on the literary landscape of India and the world. Now, the reason why I have shared all these developments is to ask the but question, BUT. This is where the big BUT question comes. While all of these fascinating developments were taking place, what was happening inside the classroom in India? Were we being given any insights into these literary strides in English being taken by our own Indian writers? Did we get any idea as to the kind of issues English could take up through literature, issues that were most relevant to us? Was there any indication that we could speak English differently from Queen's English and write in an idiomatic English that was not strictly Brit? The answer, my dear friends, is no. There was a big divide between the literary scene in India in English by Indian writers. Mind you, I'm talking till the 70s. And what we were taught as English literature, actually British literature, as a literature belonging to the British whose language was English. And what did this do to our imagination? Even someone like me, whose paternal roots are in a village in Bengal, I still dreamed of villages that had thatched roofs, roses entwining the trellis doorway, and tea somehow always meant with cucumber sandwiches. Clearly, the English curriculum at school and college had a lot to do with the way that my imagination worked and the way that I dreamed. Now, at the risk of, making this a kind of sharing of life history, which obviously most of you may not be interested in order to contextualize this, I must share some details. I completed my 10th boards as per the ICSE curriculum from Le Martiniere for Girls, Calcutta. At that time, this school was one of the most elite schools of Calcutta, and perhaps it still is. It was expensive, and all the children had access to English in multiple ways and spoke it proficiently. I went on to complete my higher secondary education from Loreto House, Calcutta, and there I had the West Bengal Board of Higher Secondary Education. In the former school, English was first language, and as per the West Bengal Board, Hindi was my first language. The reason why I am sharing these details is because various aspects are inextricably linked to the teaching and learning of English language and literature, the kind of school one attends, especially the kind of teachers. In my case, I had teachers who had themselves been trained by the Brits or Irish, and their focus on the Queen's English. The boards and their differing focus through their curricula, ICSE, which even in secondary school ensured that we read at least 2 Shakespeare plays in the original by the time we were done with the 10th grade. And then moving on to the West Bengal Board, or Ucha Madhyamik as it was called, where we had a radiant reader and a collection of poems as far as I can recall. And those of us who wanted to take up English honors in my school at Loreto House were actually privy to what was called advanced English classes to prepare us for entrance exams for college. Now, while I did not study under the CBSE framework, the point I would like to raise is that there is a fundamental difference in the way that English, and in fact, all of the humanities, are treated by the different boards. You can see on the slide in front of me, the West Bengal Board of Higher Secondary Education would be comparable to the CBSE, and I have taken the help of a resource to point it out. The CBSE board follows the All India curriculum with some additions. The NCERT recognizes the CBSE syllabus. Alternatively, the Council for the Indian School Certificate Examination, CISCE, is responsible for creating the ICSE syllabus. Students of CBSE schools are more inclined towards science and mathematics. The board also tries to balance science, arts, and humanities. Meanwhile, ICSE's focus is more on language, arts, and science subjects. CBSE students are more prepared to tread the traditional path as they are well equipped to tackle competitive exams like engineering, medical, banks, and so on. ICSE, in the meanwhile, guides the students more towards management, literature, or arts subjects. scoring in the TOEFL or scholarship exams becomes easier for them. Now, the reason why I'm sharing these fundamental aspects is because if you are a part of a board such as ICSC, first, there is a different focus altogether on language and literature. The ICSC gives a lot of weightage to English and the arts. The second is the kind of literature and language emphasis, including the evaluation pattern. They are very different as is the curriculum. In my time, this focus was strictly canonical, mainstream British literature. To give you an example, the favorite grammar book which Calcuttans are extremely nostalgic about is the one by Wren and Martin, which refers to a single book, High School English Grammar and Composition, or collectively a series of English grammar books, textbooks written jointly by P.C. Wren and H. Martin. Written primarily for the children of British officers residing in India, these books were widely adopted by Indian and Pakistani schools in the post-colonial era and missionary schools in Burma. The books were published in 1935 with a discussion on composition added later. Again, another favorite in the curriculum was Panorama, a selection of poems by J.W. Peterson, once again indicative of how even 30 years after independence, it was British selections that decided what we studied. The point is clear then that even in the 80s, we were studying English the way that the British had brought it to us. And those of us who read people like Mulk Raj Anand did so because either we were voracious readers and read everything we could lay our hands on, that being the only outlet for leisure at that time actually, or we had some very progressive thinking teachers or family members who encouraged us to do so. Such writers were never institutionalized either in school or college. Very briefly now, I would like to move on to my undergraduate studies at St. Xavier's College, which were followed, if you can see, from the poor quality on the screen. In this, we followed the syllabus that I found with very great difficulty, an absolutely mainstream syllabus which had not been revised since the inception of the university. I'm talking about 1985 to 88. Note the emphasis on rhetoric and prosody, on which we were tested. And because I was in St. Xavier's and we had an Irish priest, the late Father Lewis, who taught us meter and scansion himself, and he was really tough about it. Note also the emphasis on the history of English literature. As I hope it is visible, there is no literature other than British literature that formed a part of the curriculum. Now cut to the late 80s and my entrance into Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I can tell you that from the entrance examination itself, I realized just how divorced we were in Calcutta, even from such terms as third world literature or Commonwealth literature, and of course, Indian literature, Indian English literature as it was then called. At JNU, I had the privilege of being taught by Professor G.J.V. Prasad and other luminaries like the late Professor Meenakshi Mukherjee, academics who really shifted the discourse towards literatures in English and gave it a certain sense of direction and us a certain depth of understanding that English literature is not synonymous with British literature and that English is not the sole property of the British or even the Americans. We studied everything at JNU. British and American literature, European literature, Indian literature translated to English, literature in English by Indian writers, Australian literature, African literature, of course in English, Canadian literature. We understood the power of translation, especially good translation, and the losses in and through translation. Since we studied texts that arose from the intersection between socio-economic and political conditions, such as race, class, caste, we evolved reading strategies directed at critiquing the domains from which they have emerged. We learned new critical terminologies and themes. Of course, the time was ripe for debates as to whether one should study such Indian and other writing in English or continue to read British writers. But it was a time of getting to know contemporary India through English, either in the original or in translation. Getting to know disparities in education, power and money, caste, class and gender discrimination, and hearing the voice of the margins, be it the Dalits or writers from the Northeast, understanding also the strength and might of the fringes, and understanding furthermore the desire for visibility on the part of those in the margins. Keeping in mind the time, I will conclude by saying that more than the concern about the way the English syllabus is being redefined and may be further redefined in the years to come, and the imminent possibility, which I began with, that the wealth of understanding and knowledge that we have enjoyed since the late 80s, there is, of course, much larger concern. I read in an article in the Telegraph India that the Canterbury Christ Church University at Kent had decided to discontinue its English literature degrees at the undergraduate level from September 2025 onwards. I'm repeating, this is the Canterbury Christ Church University at Kent. Goldsmiths University of London, says the article, is also cutting its Black British Literature and Black British History's master's programs, while Oxford Brookes University and Surrey University are downsizing staff in several humanities departments, including English, history, and music. The article speculates on the reasons for such happenings, listing financial pressures, waning student interest, shift in student preferences and career choices, growth of social media, etc. Now, whatever be the reason, what is of concern is not only the survival of literature, but its diminished role in shaping public consciousness. If universities stop supporting literature, it could become a niche interest, and this shift might lead to cultural decline. I will end by saying that while I leave you with this thought, I would also like to propose that we look at strengthening English literature in English. We look at strengthening the study of literatures in English. We look at supporting writers who write in English, Indian writers who write in English, by embracing them in our institutions and in our curricula. So this presentation today was with a mission, really. There was, I think, a deeper message that I wanted to send across through my presentation. And I think I'm very glad to know that Dr. Misra will be speaking about translation and the politics of translation, because honestly, Dr. Misra, if today we have reached where we have in our understanding of India, a lot of it has been through excellent translations of literatures in other languages by writers and translators who translate from regional languages into English. So I really think that today's presentation and now the next presentation, it's a very good thing, Nandini, that you have invited Dr. Misra to speak after I have made this overview. And I hope that whatever I've said is of some source of introspection and retrospection for my listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an descriptive and really wonderful lecture. The comments and the questions will be taken after Dr. Chittaranjan Misra sir finishes.
Yes.
Sure.
Now, I must say I am really delighted to introduce our next eminent speaker, Dr. Chittaranjan Misra sir, who is a distinguished bilingual poet, critic, and translator. With a career spanning multiple colleges in Odisha, Dr. Misra has taught English literature and made significant contributions to literary translation. Notably, he has translated Albert Camus' novel The Outsider and 4 plays by Harold Pinter into Oriya. The author of 20 books, including the research work Harold Pinter, the Dramatist. Dr. Mishra's poem and papers have been published in national and international journals. He holds a PhD degree from Sambalpur University and has a strong academic background from Ravenshaw College, Cuttack. Now, I would like to request Dr. Chittaranjan Mishra sir for his very captivating lecture. So please.
Thank you, Paramita. And I must first show my gratitude to Professor Nandini Sahu, Honorable Vice Chancellor, who is very close to me as a poet, and Professor Swati Paul. It's an opportunity to listen to Professor Swati Paul. And I don't know how far I can stand up to the expectation of Professor Sahu. And I wanted to talk about comparative world literature, its evolution, and different ideas that have gone into the making of comparative world literature. So I have tried to muse over the ideas that we associate with comparative literature and the ideas that are related to the ideas of world literature, and how we have so many terms like comparative literature, world literature, global literature, planetary literature, and how through the evolution of these ideas, what is the present state of our views on literature? What is the future of literature? And I can start with an event that took place, a seminar, a national seminar that was organized in 1987 in Sambalpur University, and it was about prospect of teaching comparative literatures in Indian English departments of Indian universities. And there I had the opportunity of listening to many speakers, including Professor C.D. Narasimhaya, who is a champion of comparative literature, and also Professor Madhusudan Patti, who was very enthusiastic about that and who has written profusely on his comparatist views on Greek plays and Sanskrit plays. So I had an interest in knowing about the insights that makes one a good translator. And I was working on Harold Pinter's plays, and Harold Pinter's plays are known for the inimitable language, conversational language, that is akin to the kind of dialogues we find in absurd plays of Samuel Beckett. So I thought, though it was very challenging, I was interested in translating Harold Pinter into Oriya, and I took up one play, The Lover, and translate that into English. And I sent some copies to Harold Pinter, but I didn't have the address of Harold Pinter. I was communicating with Sarah Strode, the literary agent, and then I forgot about that. Then in Utkal University, there was a national conference, national seminar on Commonwealth literature. And there I met Professor Alastair Niven, who is no more. So he had come, and he used to come to Odisha regularly, and we went to Konark. I had the opportunity of sitting by his side in the bus, and Jayanta Mahapatra was there. And while talking with him, um, Mr. Niven asked me about what I was doing, and I told about Harold Pinter. And he said that Harold Pinter was his personal friend. And when he went to London, I gave him my translation of The Lover, Priyatama, through him. And after reaching London, he went to Australia and he forgot about my book, which was buried under brochure and different books. After 3 years, uh, he discovered the labs, and he was very regretful about it. And he again sent the books to Harold Pinter. And in a summer vacation, when I visited my college, there was a packet from Harold Pinter with his letter, and that contained 3 books, 3 plays, new plays of Harold Pinter, like Mountain Language, Party Time, and One for the Road. And Pinter had written about the delay, and he thought, and he was also interested in his translation. So I translated. The first book, The Lover, that I had translated uh, was very difficult because I had to take permission from Harold Pinter, and then I had to uh, print a copyright notice in the Odia book. I had to pay certain fees, and that was very difficult because I had to write to Reserve Bank of India, and they gave me permission. Then I went and paid the amount, and then I got the permission. But the other 3 plays, when I translated, Pinter was interested, and they didn't charge me anything. Anyway, um, my purpose of talking about this is how books circulate, how authors meet, how ideas are exchanged, and um, that gave me an interest in translating. And there are many hazards of translation. So I am reminded of translating The Outsider, and in the first phase, there is a sentence: "The telegram came from home," and I had committed a blunder, and it was already in the press. So I had translated home as Goro, Horu phone asthila. But the telegram was not from home. It was home with H capital, which means it was an old age home. So when I discovered that, I rang the man in the press, and he had to change the plate, and the whole page was changed, and then it was sent for binding. So, you know, there are certain things that are very important, and they are very much embedded in culture. So there are certain Odia words which cannot be translated, though Professor Sahu said that there is nothing which is translatable for competent translator, but it's a question of finding equivalence and substitution in the process of translation. There is a very good book called Marriage to India by Frida, and she was married to one Odia um, person who was a politician who wanted to establish a factory in his own place. They met each other in Berkeley, and Frida came to India. And because she quoted the identity of the wife of an Indian, she was debarred and deprived of so many facilities that she could have enjoyed. So she lived with much difficulty, and she had written about her marriage and all that happened after that in a very inimitable way. And the insider stories of Odia life is depicted by Frida in a very brilliant manner. And in that book, certain Odia words like hulohuli, the kind of sound, you cannot say it, ululization, and that sound which is associated with auspicious occasions, worship of God, or which is specific to women, has been very nicely narrated by Frida. So um, the subtle nuances of the cultures are related to each other. And let me come to world literature. World literature is about this all-embracing capacity, or a kind of universalism that binds literatures from different languages across the world. So um, all literature, or the term Welt literature coined by Goethe, um, came to us um, as an inspiration, and comparative literature, which was restricted to comparison or a comparatist study between basically two texts and two languages, broadened into a general study of world literature, or what we called Vishwa Sahitya, as propounded or propagated by Rabindranath Tagore. So world literature and comparative literature, when they mix, and we get the new term comparative world literature, um, we know about the politics of nomenclature. It has evolved through many stages. And since I have jotted down these ideas, I will try, I would love to read what I have written, or else I'll forget. Um, Comparative world literature is a nomenclature that combines a method and a field of study at the same time. The method involves comparatist approaches, while the area is literature pertaining to the whole globe. But when we think of comparative literature and world literature as two separate disciplines and yoke them together, their sameness seems more baffling than their differences. But in their differences lie the obscure areas that make both the terms elusive. Comparative literature is no more the investigation of influence and parallel studies in themes and techniques adopted by authors writing in different languages. It engages with themes like translation, reception, and theory. Similarly, world literature is no more the study of works written by major writers from different parts of the world, known for their universalism, but of literature that are cosmopolitan and produced from metropolitan centers, encoding complicity to power. Comparison, in a way, forms the basis of creating literature and understanding language and culture. Comparison implies differences and similarities between two objects or phenomena. One is understood in relation to the other, just as a relational theory of language that Saussurean linguistics presents. Words in a language are understood on the basis of their difference from each other. The difference is primarily recognized in the form of sound a word is spoken with and the way it is written. In literature, too, similes and metaphors structure meanings based on comparison. Comparison is all pervasive. We understand the world on the basis of cultural, social, economic differences among people, places, and time. The same can be said about similarities. Um, Goethe coined the term Weltliteratur, world literature, highlighting the similarities in works across languages. By similarities, we can refer to the best from different countries having similar significance. or talking about certain values that are common to mankind, despite differences of geographic and cultural specificities. So he considers literature as a universal possession of mankind and foregrounded their connectedness from a transnational perspective. His concept was foundational for the emergence of comparative literature as a field. He believed that national literature does not mean much at present. It's time for the era of literature, and everybody must endeavor to accelerate this. He said, quote, if we have dared to proclaim a European literature, indeed a universal world literature, then we have hardly done so simply to point out that different nations acknowledge each other and their respective creations. For in this sense, it has existed for a long time and continues more or less to flourish. Unquote. So his conviction that all things of supreme value belongs to the whole world and can only be promoted by a free and general interaction among um, contemporaries. So this concept of world literature um, was in consonance with an emergent reality of international literary exchange. What he envisioned is but a sense of global modernity. Despite these kinds of interpretation, world literature as a category remains problematic. Daniel Dugan, a comparatist who has worked on the development, translation, and circulation of world literature, said, world literature does not exist. We ask about world literature with suspicion. Which literature can be called world literature, and whose world it is? The answers are implicated in a reorientation of our way of looking at the literary perspective and cultural changes. Does world literature develop at the cost of national literatures? Is it more or less a submission to the so-called mainstream literature promoted by media tycoons and multinational publication projects? It seems as though nationalist works need to opt for self-effacement, replaced by a spirit of globalism controlled by digital colonization. The worldliness that Goethe found in great writings and the worldwide circulation is redefined today by the world market. Marx and Engels viewed that the exploitation of the world market gave the cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. In the process, it has drawn under the feet of industry the national grounds on which it stood. Concomitantly, Goethe had announced the obsolescence of national literature. World literature was conceived as a traffic in ideas between peoples, facilitated by, quote, literary market to which the nations bring their intellectual treasures for exchange, unquote. But in practice, national literatures continue to grow and compete with world literature. Since world literature and world market conditions are closely related, literary value is largely controlled by metropolitan centers of the West. A critic describes the situation as a scenario of underdog nations battling for a place in a literary sun blocked by a shadow of tyrant language and literatures. Literature is subject to social Darwinism, which equates market with culture, with nature. What emerges as significant is the version of Victor's history. The comparatist is lost in the quicksand of politics where European foundations resist the rebellious incursions of post-colonial literature and world literature. Um, David Damrus, in his What is World Literature, says that it is a set of works in which literature circulates beyond its culture of origin, either in its original language or in translation. He further adds that it is a particular way of reading literature informed by worldly or cosmopolitan principles and directly or indirectly opposed to nation-based approaches to the comparative study of literary texts. Uh, Damrus explains in this context the meaning of the keyword world as a cognitive willingness to engage with difference. So this cognitive willingness to engage with difference is prioritized over the understanding a society or culture in particular. It's a kind of engagement with other realms of understanding and experience that are different from our own. Another critic, Graham Hagan, considers world literature as a liberal humanist project. He theorizes that world literature promotes cultural citizenship in a globalized world. This is related to the tenets of European-based liberal humanism, whose ideological lineage may be traced more recently to post-war exilic consciousness and the minoritarian sympathies of post-colonial thoughts. In other words, Graham Hagan sees world literature as an ideological project set by European liberal humanism, which values universal human dignity, empathy, and cross-cultural understanding. In a globalized world, it promotes cultural citizenship, the idea of belonging to a shared global cultural community. This vision draws on the moral awareness created by post-war exile and displacement and the minority-focused concerns of post-colonial thought, but still largely operates within European intellectual tradition. Hagan looks at world literature not just as a collection of texts from around the globe, but as something shaped by certain values and ideologies. By ideological lineage, he means that these values come primarily from European intellectual history. After World War II, after Second World War, many writers, intellectuals, and artists experienced displacement, exile, or migration. This created a heightened awareness of borders, cultural difference, and empathy for those whose life was out of key. So Hagen refers post-war exilic consciousness as a shaping force of world literature. Um, the other shaping force he locates in minoritarian sympathies of post-colonial thought. Post-colonial theory often focuses on marginalized groups or minorities and critiques colonial power structures. Edward Said viewed that in the era of political fragmentation and economic integration of the planet, comparative literature does not succeed in reconciling the unifying cultural aspiration of worldliness. The worldliness is a dream that literature can make people feel connected across cultures. Edward Said argues that in our globalized yet divided world, comparative literature cannot truly bridge the gap between the ideal of cultural unity and the reality of political and cultural divisions. World literature is produced around the paradoxical state of the world, which is politically divided but economically tied together. Nations, regions, and communities are increasingly divided by political boundaries, nationalism, and conflicts. At the same time, globalization is making economies more connected, more interconnected as regards trade, finance, markets, and production chains. So, as an academic project, literature is studied as a component of cultural studies transformed by interdisciplinary approaches. As Pratt suggests, this transformation is caused by three historical forces like globalization, democratization, and decolonization. According to another critic, Emily Apter, she says world histories are studied as world histories. Stylistics and metrics are studied along with diaspora. For her, the historical evolution of a single word, phrase, or linguistic structure can be tied to global movements like colonial expansion, migration, trade, cultural exchange, and so on. She links stylistics or the study of literary style and metrics, poetic forms with diaspora studies because he recognizes that diasporic communities carry and transform languages, poetic forms, and cultural practices as they move. In her framework, language is never isolated. It's part of transnational wave of historical and political forces. So this discipline faces crucial issues related to cultural implications of literary methodology. It is difficult to rise above Anglocentric parameters since most of the works are accessed through English translation. The rule of English continues, and the use of English translation continues as the logical choice. So it is a logical choice in all academic transactions related to world literature. English as the global language of exchange and information is preferred by translators everywhere. After views that global translation is another name for comparative literature. So comparative literature is nothing but global translation and the circulation, discussion of those translations. Without translation, the international circulation of literature cannot be imagined. World literature, in this sense, goes beyond the restrictions of comparative literature, where philology and source studies are undertaken under nationalist motivation. Instead of focusing on two texts or two languages, the comparatist study is broadened now to a simultaneous attention to multiplicity of languages and cultures. World literature facilitates a study of general literature, transcending the boundaries of analysis, stylistics, formalism, and structural components of language into cultural and ideological realms. Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak, in her book Death of a Discipline, had discussed the crisis faced by comparative literature in the beginning of 21st century. But she has tried to reconfigure it as a deliberately uneasy amalgam of area studies, post-colonial studies, provisionally transformed from below by being opened up to non-hegemonic language of the South. Now, ACLA the American Comparative Literature Association, which was founded in 1916, uh, is considered as the principal learned society in the United States for scholars whose work involves several literatures and cultures, as well as the premises of cross-cultural study itself. The association spells out in their website, I quote, in its largest sense, comparative literature promotes the study of the study of intercultural relations that cross national boundaries, multicultural relations within a particular society, and the interactions between literature and other forms of human activity, including the arts, the sciences, the philosophy, and cultural artifacts of all kinds. Similarly, International Comparative Literature Association as a world body encourages exchange and cooperation among comparatists. Now, um, world literature has become more visible in the digital age. We can access books through links of hyperconnect and literatures originating, or there are certain literatures that originated on the screen or inside the computer, and they originate in the computer. They're read, discussed, sold, published, and archived digitally in cyberspace. As we smoothly navigate in the cyberspace that has made the globe flattened, is subject to invisible control and panoptic lurking. In an essay titled Comparative Literature in an Age of Terrorism, uh, Jalal Qadir says about the impediments in the path of the emergence of planetary literature imagined by Spivak, in contrast to global literature, because Spivak thought that this nomenclature global refers to politics, or global is a political space. But planet is an undivided, neutral place. And but now the planet is also weaponized. So Qadir says that Spivak's taking comparative literature's claim to a planet as an undivided natural space is thoroughly weaponized, whose every inch is already platted on universal global positioning systems, GPS system. So the dream of seeking consensus through plurality is subject to transcoded trade terror. It's a term that it is defined as full spectrum dominance. Full spectrum dominance refers to uh, the national strategy, defense strategy of USA in the beginning of the century. So comparative literature or comparative world literature and promotion of comparative literature, circulation of world literature or planetary literature or whatever we call are very dynamic in nature, and the circulation is not that simple because there are invisible impediments, and it is also subject to surveillance, and the free place that seems so free is not really free. Now, the last paragraph uh, talk about India. India being the land of cultural plurality, its literature has evolved, sustained by a comparative perspective. Professor C.D. Narasimhaya has rightly said the future of English departments in this country belong to comparative literature. He feels one cannot find a more fertile soil for comparative literature to thrive than Indian society, with its pluralism, and Hinduism in particular with its ocean-like absorbent quality. To end, we can say, in a sense, comparative literature in India is not simply about comparing Indian literature with Western literature. It's about exploring the complexities of India's own literary landscape, its relationship with the world, and the evolving nature of literary studies itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your such an engaging lecture. Now, I would like to request Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am for her very valuable remarks. Ma'am, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Paramita. I will speak without the video because there is some issue, and the moment I switch it on, the voice goes. So I'll speak like this. Um, Professor Swati Paul, as expected, her presentation was very, very well researched, and it was full of information and future possibilities. And she rightly said that it's time for us to revise and revisit the syllabi of universities. Uh, in this context, I am reminded that in one of the universities where I proposed the poetry of a poet who passed away at 56, I proposed his poetry to be taken in a very big and important university, and it was told that he was too young. Okay, so I don't think that the youth or old age or age of the writer should be considered when we uh, prepare our syllabus. Rather, the universality and the writing style and contribution to the society, so many things are there to be considered. So, Professor Swati, you will be glad to know that we have already prepared a list of authors, writers, poets, critics, and theorists whose writings can be included in the comparative literature department of Hindi University, which we are preparing now. This lecture series just one step towards that, and we have taken at least one poem from all my contemporaries. Of course, that includes you, and we will get the syllabus approved in near future. So, your lecture was very important for us. That my takeaway is pertinent. The shift from teaching English literature traditionally from the canon of British authors and Eurocentric values was something that you challenged, and you advocated in favor of studying literatures, not just literature, but literatures in English with a critical and pedagogical turn that challenges the cultural hierarchies and epistemic exclusions. You talked about inclusivity. You challenged the epistemic exclusions, that is important. You talked about flexibility, you talked about inclusivity, and then some syllabus that is rooted in post colonial, feminist, decolonial thoughts. And then your lecture pointed at some approach that positions the classrooms as a site of dialogue where multiple voices, silenced voices, histories, and aesthetic traditions they converge, they speak to each other. You advocated in favor of that, and that is something that I have forever been trying to do by foregrounding texts from diverse geographies, identities, socio-political contexts. You invited the students, because you are such a diehard teacher, so you invited the students to interrogate power, language, and representation while developing interpretive agencies. That was something which was very powerful, very interesting. Your critical pedagogy was, it was a reception of the great works in favor of participatory reflexive engagements. And then you wanted to enable your learners to question whose stories are being told. Like you talked about gender, about the queer, about the marginalized groups, the subaltern, the folk, the tribals. So whose voice is spoken, whose voice is heard, and whose voice is silenced? You pointed at that. And then I was very happy when you talked in favor of transforming our literature departments from exercises in cultural consumptions into active places, active practices of cultural critiquing and ethical imagination. That is why, with this kind of a point of view, you are in a position to give such new directions to your own departments. You are thinking about revising the syllabus, you are thinking about including new writers, young writers. So I'm very much in favor of that. And when we design our final syllabus of Hindi University departments, I would certainly go to you, get back to you with more questions and with more, research that you have been doing. Your PowerPoint presentation was very interesting. We have saved it. It's going to be a part of our YouTube lecture series, and I'm sure that the participants and the students and Hindi University teachers are hugely benefited by this particular lecture that you delivered today. We would invite you once again very soon, maybe to some offline mode lecture series, maybe after the puja vacation or something like that. We are planning things like that. So till then, I will be in touch with you. I'll be seeking your guidance and support. Thanks a lot for this very powerful and interesting lecture.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. And now, Dr. Chittaranjan Misra, uh, I'm glad that you told comparative world literature is not that simple. Many people may think that comparative literature is simple, and that itself is a simplistic idea. When it is comparative literature and world literature taken together, comparative world literatures, I don't think many universities in the country have departments which are called comparative world literatures. When I conceived this department, comparative world literatures, I had a lot of things in my mind, that we should not compare only Bhasha literatures in India. Rather, the Bhasha literatures, all the literatures of 23 languages and folk and tribal languages in India should be compared through a comparative pedagogy, which some of our speakers have very critically pointed out in the past. And today, both of you pointed out that what should be compared, what should not be compared. What is like comparing two Hindi writers or two Bengali writers may not be a part of comparative literature pedagogy. So, who to compare with which other writer is something that we should think critically. But again, you concluded by saying that the future of English departments, I would like to revise, the future of language literature departments belongs to comparative literature. Without comparison, we would be like, cocooned, that we may not be as broad in our thinking as we should be. And one literature as a liberal humanism approach, yes, that is interesting, important. Cross cultural understanding and citizenship, some great idea. I am going to do some research on this. And then role of English without any choice, when you said, and English as a non-hegemonic language, I so agree with you that there is no choice for us but to go to English. And then you gave examples from Ghoro as old age home. Ghoro and old age home. Yes, I have faced such things. I was trying to translate one Odia text, Manobodha Jyotisa, and also I was trying to translate Upendra Bhanja, which I have done little bit. I will discuss that with you. So Ghoro and old age home are so different. And then ululation, hula huli in Odia, that is also in West Bengal during Dashera puja, women do that with all with lot of beautiful and very interesting ululation traditions are there in eastern part of the country, especially in Odisha and West Bengal and some part of northeast India. But translating hula huli to ululation is, not the exact translation. And then the critical translation pedagogy that you talked about, it views that translation is not just a neutral act of language transfer, but it's a socially situated, politically charged practice. And translation shapes, and it is shaped by power, ideology, and cultural histories. And I was glad you gave so many examples from cultural histories, and you shared little bit of your historic experiences with great writers from our country. And then in the classroom, translation is something that is moving beyond the prescriptive equivalence based models. Rather, translation should explore how the decisions taken by the translator, they're influenced by context, audience, identity, and then how translation can reinforce or resist the hegemonic narratives. And translation students engage with theory and practice. So we have a department of translation studies, and Dr. Paramita also, she belongs to that department. She is the coordinator. So they have been doing seminal work. They are translating great texts. They are practicing translators. They are theorizing translation. So I'm sure that the teachers of translation studies department, they are from Hindi University, are benefited by you by foregrounding agency, reflexivity, accountability of a translator, and then critical ideas of a translator, not just purely linguistic skill, but as a cultural activism. Translation as a cultural activism. So these are the things that are my takeaways from your lecture today. Translation can lead us to a justice-oriented citizenship, good governance, justice oriented citizenship. These things are also possible when we take one text from one language to another language and then we bring home the culture. So, your lecture was definitely very, very powerful, and I am benefited personally. I'm sure that my colleagues are benefited. We will very soon get in touch with you for more such lectures and some very tangible contributions from you. Thank you so much for being a part of our lecture series.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would request our lovely participants. Yes. Now, I would request our lovely participants, if you have any questions, you may ask now. Raji. Okay. So,
if people are taking some time to ask questions, I'd like to just add something, if I may.
yeah, ma'am.
Yes. First and foremost, I want to tell Professor Sahu that, I don't know about what Dr. Misra feels, but I feel that Professor Sahu's takeaways and her description of her takeaways were perhaps more powerful than my speech itself. So honestly, I must thank you for that. But I wanted to add that, one of the things, again, which I want to reiterate is that let us not be under any doubt about the fact that not just English literature, but a lot of subjects are facing some challenges. I'm not going to be, pronouncing doomsday, and I'm not going to say that we are therefore the sky is going to fall on our heads and we're not going to exist anymore. But if it is happening in England, and the examples I gave you are from England, and the article was written by somebody in Bengal. So if England is facing such crises, then we can understand what that we need to be very, very zealous about safeguarding ourselves. But when we safeguard ourselves as English literature or English language departments, we should also be on track. That was the purpose of my presentation, that we should not fall back into the old, for almost 3 decades, what we continued as being promoters of very canonical British English, but we should actually we can promote the English language, but we should do that as, being intermediaries of culture in terms of both Indian writing, Australian writing, global writing. And I think for a comparative literatures, department, or a comparative or a person who's interested in comparative literatures as much as you are, Professor Sahu, that this would be therefore very, very important. And I'm glad that you said that, you're considering so many new people, etc., for the kind of syllabi that you are creating. So, Dr. Misra, your lecture was fascinating. And I want to tell you something that we do as part of pedagogy in my college, and that I have done. So, for example, when we teach modern European drama, I teach, that is my area of expertise, really. So when we teach Ibsen's Ghosts, one of my favorite homework for the students is, I keep telling them, make it relevant to your society. Okay. And Ghost talks about syphilis, and the fact that there is the character who is struck by syphilis, and syphilis was a taboo subject. You couldn't talk about it then. And it's very interesting that, and I have presented on this at various platforms, that my students have come up with modern versions, Indian versions of syphilis now being replaced by things like AIDS, by erectile dysfunction, by mental health, depression, and so on, and also by religion, by terrorism. So they have replaced. So it's amazing the ability of students to adapt and contextualize. And there is a translation then which is beyond language. For me, translation is communication. It's not necessarily only language. It is also translation of form, translation of theme, and so on. So that is very successful. And way back when I was a young teacher, now I'm very old, but when I was a young teacher in this college, we did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I was shocked because being a theater person, we all wanted the meatiest roles, the ones which had the longest dialogues. And my students would come and say, ma'am, why does this character speak so much? I asked them, what's the problem? They said, ma'am, because so much of Shakespearean English, it becomes very difficult. So, Professor Misra, I must tell you, we did a little exercise we took a particular act and a scene, and we said, okay, now you translate this in your own tongue. And I had students from Kerala, from Bengal, from Haryana, and so on. This experiment that we did is on the IIIL, Institute of Lifelong Learning website. It is called Rehearsing the Dream. Because when they did it in their own language, after that, the whole play just opened up to them. So, this whole act of translation sometimes opens the doors to a deeper understanding of a text. I wanted to share this. Sorry, I've talked a lot.
No, not at all. We are having a conversation. And Professor Swati, your discussion reminds me of Karnataki folk theatre tradition by B.V. Karan. It's Varnam Vana, and it's Shakespearean tragedies written in the folk form from Karnataka. So that is also a kind of transliteration, where Shakespearean tragedy is taken and given a folk form. So probably those kinds of texts also can be considered as a part of comparative literature departments. Kaha Shakespeare, kaha Karnataki folk theatre.
Yes. Production of Shakespearean texts, for example, Utpal Dutt in Bengal, and what he did with the little theatre group, and how he converted Shakespeare using Jatra. That was absolutely fascinating. And how translations by, I'm forgetting the name of the translator, but he used Bangla translations, and how, so when originally it was done in translation, it didn't work. But the moment he introduced the Jatra form into it, so even modes of, production in theater, that whole semantics, it changes, even with the forms of production.
Sure. Fine, Dr. Misra. Okay, then Paramita, we can conclude.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much. So as we conclude this enriching webinar on comparative world literatures, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am. And we thank to our distinguished speakers, Professor Swati Pal, ma'am, and Dr. Chittaranjan Misra, sir. We are deeply grateful for sharing your expertise. Thank you so much once again. And to our very lovely participants, thank you so much for such an active engagement from your side. And a special thank to Team Hindi University for your support and cooperation. Thank you all of you for joining us today, and have a very good day. Namaste.
Okay, then namaskar. Now I'm going to the airport. Okay, bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you, Dr. Misra, and what a fascinating, you've done so much of work in this area. I loved listening to you, really. Very enjoyable. You must, give us a lecture too at Janki Devi, right?
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Namaste.